They all have the Debit grape in them. Another grape that I wasn't familiar with before. The oaked one, first of all, I think certainly in the UK, the market is moving away from this sort of style. One of you may be aware that Australian wine for a long time has been very successful in the UK, but in the last couple of years, Australia's reputation has suffered a little bit. And what started off its decline in reputation was actually some of the more heavily oaked whites, which people got tired of. And people don't mind oak-aged whites, but as long as the oak is discreet, quite subtle. And I think in this one, it's a bit too strong for the UK market. And also, it is quite oxidized as well. This one is quite sherry-like in style as well as the oak. So I think the market is moving away from that. The other two, I actually think are quite close to the sort of wine that the market is interested in at the moment. Again, I think we've got bored with a lot of the New World wine producers have been playing with different yeasts for white wine, where they can make wine that smells of apricots and pineapple and coconut and guava, all this sort of thing. That's fine for the cheaper wines, but that's not really what we're looking for in serious wines. And I think what I like about both of these two is that the aptly character that the grape has, although I do find there's something else as well. I haven't a clue what gooseberries are in Croatian, but it reminds me of other fruits as well, and maybe a little bit of pear as well on the palate. Somehow those characters, apple, pear, I think in the UK just seem more natural. Possibly because we're a northern country and we're more at home with the cool climate fruits rather than the hot climate fruits. But certainly wines that have that slightly aptly character somehow seem more natural. And there is, that takes me back to the amphora that we tried earlier as well. There is very much it's a very small movement, but an interesting movement from a trade professional's perspective towards more natural wines. Wines made with less intervention in the vineyard, less chemicals, and in the cellars, limited use of sulfur dioxide, and if sometimes maybe flavours that we're not used to, but we're being challenged by these, and I think we're much more tolerant of these. And there are some natural wines which, and somehow these just do taste quite natural to me. And that is the way a part of the market is heading, without question. So I thought those were quite interesting. I thought the number 12 was the more complex of the two, but I did like 14 as well because I liked its freshness, its simplicity, and its naturalness.
What did you think about this amphora style?
What did I think about the amphora?
Did you make a comment?
Not really. No, I was sorry. I should have done. I was talking about the Debit wines. The amphora wine is hugely exciting. I mean, I find it difficult to know what to say. It's always easier to talk about wine when there's something about it that's familiar. And with a wine like that, where for me there's nothing that's familiar, it's difficult to talk about it. But I loved the fact that it looked a little bit as if it was going to be a little bit oxidized, but it didn't taste oxidized. There was a freshness about it, a liveliness, a vigor, very, very natural in taste, very dry, and yet it had enough texture to support the dryness. But I've mentioned the word 2 or 3 times, and I think it's a real strength from what I see this evening. There's a real boldness in that style. This is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. And that's terrific. And it is very, very exciting wine. I don't know whether that style is widespread in Croatia, but it seems to me that it's I have no idea how it's achieved with minimum use of sulfur, but certainly there must be tremendous attention to detail, I assume, both in the vineyard and in the cellars, to achieve that clarity of flavour, the purity of flavour, with no oxidation, and yet clearly it comes across as slightly aged, and it looks and tastes as if it probably could last a very long time. If it's got to that stage without being oxidised, it's hard to see what's going to oxidise it in future. It could last a very long time. I don't know whether there are older examples available, but really, really interesting wine. Is that expensive as well?
Yeah.
Are there other producers of that style as well?
One other in Istria that produces
One.
amphoras, but a slightly different style. But
Okay.
amphoras are...
Presumably it's produced in very small quantities.
yeah, the amphora is 2,600 liters and is buried in the ground.
Right.
I don't know when you come across the amphoras, but they are for Georgia, imported
Yep.
into Croatia. So it's a new thing that's being developed. I think Tomac is one among two of them, one in Istria and one in near Zagreb region that is doing this
Okay.
kind of thing.
I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's an interesting style?
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I love that, but that's a real discovery, and I will remember that. But that is the sort of wine, if you're going to be exporting, and I mean, this is something I wasn't going to talk about now, but I mean, if you are going to be exporting, I would strongly recommend that you try to do some work together, collectively, because then your message is going to be much stronger and you can share some of the costs involved. But if you are, whether you're doing that or independently, you need wines with stories. Because that's what, if you want the wine press to write about you, it's an awful lot easier for them if you give them the story. Okay? That's what they like. They're lazy. Sorry. Well, they're journalists. But it's easier if we give the press the story. And where you've got wines here with stories, terrific. These last three different grapes and blends. The Sauvignon, I just really liked. I know it's made in a not quite dry style, but I loved that. I like the fact, I suppose I'm very bored of New Zealand Sauvignon. And if you're bored of New Zealand Sauvignon, then this is a breath of fresh air. Because New Zealand Sauvignon is often so intense, and a half a glass goes a very long way. Whereas with this, I'd want another half a glass and another full glass and a bit more. I like the fact that the aromas are quite restrained. On the palate, there's that little bit of sweetness, but it's genuine fruit sweetness. With too many of the wines we see in the UK, they have residual sugar, but there's just residual sugar, alcohol and acidity, and actually no fruit, no flavour. This has genuine flavour. And I really liked it. And it finishes dry and clean. I thought this was extremely good. I like that. I think how commercial it is, I'm not quite sure, because I don't really think this has been tried before. There's no question that some of the New Zealand Sauvignons have quite a lot of residual sugar, but they're just so different in style to this that I'm not sure one can compare them. But I do think that this is a really intriguing style of wine. The number 16, for me, the alcohol got in the way here again. For me, maybe it's just me, but I was too conscious. I was more conscious of alcohol than flavour. So I'm sorry. I say what I think. That's the way it came across to me, and I don't think that's. I suppose the other thing I should say is I don't think that's the way the market is moving in terms of style of white wine. The third one of these was a really good white wine to finish with, because I think we've talked about oak a little bit, and I've talked about the fact that I think the market is moving towards wine where the oak is quite discreet, quite subtle. I think this is an excellent example. where there's a little bit of oak, but it helps the balance, the harmony, the overall completeness of the wine, but certainly doesn't dominate. And I was more conscious of freshness, lightness, and again I found this quite natural. There was just a naturalness about it, very appetizing, and to finish off with what I said right at the beginning, very easy to drink. So I did like that as well. I thought that was very well done. I think some of you want a cigar break. So we will, maybe we'll have I think there's maybe a short break now.
Yeah.
And then we